Okay, Tom, welcome to the show.
Mate, thank you so much for the invite. Very much appreciated.
Tom, I want to jump straight in. I want to be very respectful of your time here today. So, listen, Tom, there's loads that I want to get through with you. Let's start with some of the ultra endurance races that you've done. I think it's like, for me personally, I've got aspirations to go and do some of them myself. And I always think it's super motivating listening to other people telling their stories around those races. How did you get into that that endurance game?
Sure. I was playing rugby for most of my life at different levels, and managed to squeeze myself into the local international sevens team here as probably the guy that didn't give up. Definitely not the guy with the most skills, but maybe that set me on a path for what it ended up becoming. I got injured. I snapped my knee, basically broke my snapped my ACL, and it was a bit of a mess. And as I was coming out of that, it'd been my life. I'd been training multiple days a week. It was a really big deal for me. And as I was coming out of that, I started to obviously go through the rehab and the recovery. And the first thing that you can do after you damage your ACL in that way and damage your knee in that way is to go in a straight line, because it's the sideways movement, lateral movement that causes the problems, as you very well know. So I started jogging as the first thing I was doing. And I'd always enjoyed pushing myself mentally to the limits that I had. So within rugby, I tried to be always the fittest person on the team, always pushing myself, and not necessarily the fittest in terms of physicality, but I did feel that I would push myself into the red more so than anybody else would. And that was kind of my area of, I suppose, what I brought to the table. I buried myself deeper than most people. So when I started to get into running, I used that, I suppose, skill set, for want of a better term, to start running further and further and kind of seeing how far my body could go. And I've got quite an addictive personality. So then kind of those two things coupled together, it led into, I wonder what a marathon would be like. And it was, it's on everyone's bucket list. It was on my bucket list for a long time. And I did that. And I was like, wow, that was a bit better than I thought it was going to go. And I enjoyed it. Now what's next? And then I started to hear about, there are races that are longer than marathons, because at the time I thought the marathon was the longest run in the world. But then you start to kind of put one foot into this kind of ecosystem and this totally new universe of ultra running, and you realize that you're right at the bottom, and there's a whole world of this in front of you. So started the first race. So to get into it, myself and my good buddy Marcus Smith from Innerfight, who I know has been on the podcast before, and you can tag into his show there. Him and I were chatting, and we decided to jump on a plane, fly across to Wales, and do an ultra in Abergavenny in Wales. And it was across the Welsh Brecon Beacons. It was a place that I'd spent a lot of time growing up. I'm from Wales originally, so it was great to kind of fly back and go home into the mountains. I fell to pieces in that race, but we'll get onto that later. But the first one was an 80-kilometer race, one shot across the mountains, and it was life-changing for me in terms of, it put me in a position where I knew I had to do something more, because it didn't go well for me.
Can I just stop you there on that point? Because I think it's really eye-opening where, you just brush over like 80-kilometer race through the mountains, and it's just like, we talked about marathons going into there, but I think it really helps set the scene and why I invited you on the podcast. And, I've titled it around about pushing your limits. And that's why I wanted to start with, your kind of like trip into the endurance racing, because you've gone through that process. Like you said, you went from rehabilitation into perhaps going in and doing your first marathon up to 80K. And I'm going to let you continue from there, because I know it gets even more than that.
Yeah. So went into the 80, very naive. I was very, very naive when I went into that 80K, where I was doing 20-kilometer runs and thinking, what, 20K is quite far. And I felt pretty good at the end of the 20K. I'm sure I could do more. I was so naive with our training. So we went into that race. Obviously it fell apart at about 50, 60 kilometers, because we'd never done anything like it. And we still had quite a long way to go. So it was, mentally I broke. I was complaining about a lot of stuff, and it was, it wasn't a fun day out, but it was what was needed. It was a real slap around the face to be like, you have to be humble. You have to understand your limits. You cannot be arrogant when you come into endurance running. And I think that's one of the real things that endurance sports teach you, because you can be on top of the world one day, and then for no real reason, you can't understand why, but you can fall to pieces in the next race. So it certainly keeps you grounded. The next one after that, as I said, because that one went badly for me, I sat down and kind of reassessed and thought I could stop this here. I could just never go back and just think, this game is not for me. But I sat down and I thought, I need to do something to get this kind of like monkey off my back. It was just constantly in my ear, you know. It was a real problem for me. So I looked at what could be a bigger race, and what could, if I succeeded in it, where would that get me, sort of mentally, physically, and the like. And did a bit of research and was talking to Marcus, and we came across this race called the Marathon des Sables, which is now quite well known. But it was quite a few years ago that we did this, and outside of the world of ultra running, where it was very well known, outside of that world, not so much. But now quite a few people know about it. But to give you a bit of a breakdown for those that might be listening that don't know about it, it's a 250-kilometer race across the Sahara Desert, self-supported. So the only thing they give you for the duration of the race is water. You have to carry your camping kit, your food, your medical, you don't really change your clothes, to be honest. So you're basically sleeping on the floor in like a lean-to. It's not a tent, it's just a lean-to. It's open at either end. And when I say the middle of nowhere, you feel like you're on Mars. I mean, they fly you in charter flights to a specific airport called Ouazouate on the outskirts of the Sahara Desert in Morocco. That's already in the middle of nowhere. You land there, you get on buses, you go 10 hours into the desert, you get off buses, wow. You get onto 4x4s, and then from 4x4s, they take you away from the road and into the sand dunes. So when I say you're so remote, you would never go to this place unless you were doing this run. And you start there, and away you go. So you've got 6 marathons back to back across the sand dunes, and you're going up jebels, you're going across cracked riverbeds, and through the sand dunes that you would expect for the Sahara. So that was a very significant moment in my life.
Known as the world's toughest foot race, although I know that there's probably other races that can rival that now and outdo that. But
absolutely, yeah. So the Discovery Channel, they documented it just a couple of years before myself and Marcus did it, and they termed it as the toughest foot race on earth. But I can tell you it's not. It's pretty tough. But look, to get into it in terms of what does all this mean, and what do you take away from that? For me, the main lesson from going through that process and the life-changing kind of experience that I went through with the Marathon des Sables was because I'd broken on that previous run, because it had really gone badly for me. I sat down and I made notes about what had happened, really kind of tried to digest. Why did your body fall apart? Why did your mind fall apart? Why were you complaining? Why were you whinging about stuff? Why were you not the person that you wanted to be? And I really sort of went quite deep in that, rather than trying to just put it behind me and forget about it. And I think that doing that was very, very significant. And if I hadn't gone into that in depth, I never would have achieved what happened later with the other races and fixing that. So when I was sat on the flight, and it's a charter flight, so the only people on the plane are those people that are doing this race with you. Now I'm sat on the plane, I'm thinking, I fell apart in a race that was 80K, and I'm about to land in the Sahara and try and take on 250. And everybody around me is, shaved heads, Iron Man tattoos, like just built like they've just come out of a CrossFit gym. And then there's me sitting there thinking, I am way out of my depth here. But I was scribbling some notes on a piece of paper. And on those notes, it was they were goals. They were behavioral goals. How did I want to behave? It wasn't about, I want to come in the top 20, or I want to come this, or I want to come whatever. And obviously that wouldn't have happened. But it was making these notes around behaviors. And that was the thing that I could control. I couldn't control how good everybody else was. I couldn't control where I finished in the race to an extent. But I could control how I chose to behave when the proverbial shit hit the fan. And those are the decisions that you need to make before you arrive at that situation, before you arrive at that destination. And there were things like, after like the don't die, obviously, we got into it, I got into it and started talking about like, do not complain once. Motivate others to finish. Like, be a positive force in this race. That if people see you, they think, wow, that guy's doing well. He must feel great. I'm going to get people up off the ground when I go past them, and try and be like that strong in that race, even though I'd folded in the previous one. And those were the goals that I kept with me the whole time. And that was my core focus. Finishing was obviously one of them, but that was the core focus. And flying out of there after the race and having completed it, those were the things that I was most proud of. And that was the fundamental mindset shift coming back into, let's say, reality, of understanding what I was then capable of, and understanding that no matter how low you go, and this is the takeaway from this, no matter how low you go, no matter how badly you mess up, no matter how unfit you get yourself, if you can make that decision that you are going to behave in a certain way, which will, those are success markers on the route to being successful. If you can focus on that, you can get yourself to the highest levels, way like beyond your dreams of what you thought you could potentially do just, let's say, a few months before. And that was, I took that back into business. I took that back into normal life. And to be honest, it almost built armor around my mind. I just felt like if I can do that, I can do anything. And I understand sometimes that's a 5K run, sometimes it's a 10K, sometimes it's a marathon. It doesn't have to be the Marathon des Sables, but if you can get yourself to that space, then you've achieved something that you didn't think you were capable of. And if you can keep doing that, David Goggins talks about callousing the mind. Every time you do it, there's that small little shift in your character. There's that little bit more armor that you have. And that was a big takeaway.
Yeah, that's super interesting. And I really want to know, like you talked about, I heard you talk about on another podcast and you referenced it there, obviously disaster when you were in Wales doing that first ultra that you did, and almost like that victim mindset, or like I've termed it like woe is me mindset. What's that crossover? Because obviously you've got a very successful business here in Dubai as well. How do you find that crosses over into other areas of your life? That resilience to be able to not complain during the Marathon des Sables, obviously to finish the races, or what's that crossover like into relationships, into work, into other things in your life? Do you think there is one?
Not only there is one, it's the fundamental shift that's changed my life completely. It's not a coincidence that the years following coming back from that race, my business started to grow, started to change, and we started to operate in different ways. And I felt more comfortable as a human. I was more accepting of myself. It changed everything. And you touched on it there. It is about this victim mindset. You can see life. You can look at this in two ways. I think it was actually when I was on the Modern Wisdom podcast with Chris Williamson, and he'd mentioned something in response to one of the things I said. And I think he'd said he'd read Naval Ravikant, the almanac
exactly,
of Naval Ravikant. Yeah, you know which quote I'm talking about. It's like you're born, and there's a certain set of stimuli that happen, and then you die, and your choice is how you respond to that. Yeah. And it's super clear, because, and that summarized everything that I tried to say, but I'll give it a little bit more context. Coming back from that race, or in order to achieve that race, in order to finish that race, you have to understand that a lot of things are going to happen to you. So you can bring it down to it's life. You start the race and you finish the race, hopefully. And everything that happens to you in between is going to happen. It's up to you how you choose to respond to that. You might roll your ankle. You can sit there like a victim that you've rolled your ankle. You think, right, what can I do here? What can I do now? What's the smallest thing I can do in order to move forward? So, what have I got in my bag? Okay, I've got this in my bag, I've got that in my bag, I can strap my foot, I can do this, I can do that, I can put a stick down it, whatever you need to do in order to keep moving forward. And if your immediate mindset is, okay, this has happened, what do I need to do now? Then you're going to be successful. Like if you think, I think it was Will Smith that came out with a quote the other day, a little while back, which is super powerful. And it's like, it's talking about it. It might not be your fault, but it is your responsibility. So whatever happened in that race, whatever happens in life, like shit happens. Like something's going to happen. Someone's going to walk out on you. Your biggest client's going to cancel your contract. Whatever it is in your ecosystem, in your world that's super significant, it can potentially go wrong at any time, and it might not have anything to do with you. COVID's a prime example. COVID's nobody's fault, we hope. But COVID's nobody's fault, but it's happened to all of us, and it's affected all of us in different ways. And we've all had to significantly change every area of our lives to accommodate what's happened in the last 18 months. Now, that's not your fault as an individual, whoever's listening, but it is absolutely your responsibility to figure your life out around it. And that was the key thing that I took away from that, rather than being the victim. It was about just being pragmatic. And when it happens in business, and there's 140 people in my agency, and we're operating across multiple offices in multiple countries. There are things going wrong every single day. And I've got no idea what's going to come at me. Every time I sit down, I open up my laptop, it could be a relatively normal day, which is mildly chaotic, or it could be absolute mayhem, and we're plugging holes in the bottom of the ship and something else is on fire. And it's just the nature of dealing with that many people. And if I took it personally, I would have a complete meltdown. I just wouldn't be able to do it. And if I think like, it's, why is this happening to me? It's unfair. This wouldn't happen to somebody else. If that's the way that you think, then you're not going to be successful. You just have to own the situation and own the outcome. It takes you on to, I read a lot about extreme ownership, Jocko Willink. I'm sure you've read that book or certainly know about it. And it's that's also been sort of a fundamental, once I kind of got into that space, layering on learnings like that of just owning the outcome, no matter what's going on. If you choose that's what you want out of life, it's absolutely your responsibility to make that happen.
Jocko Willink, Extreme Ownership, is an amazing book for anybody that hasn't read or listened to that one. I definitely recommend it, because what I like most about that is it's got all the the caveat, almost like self-development and things that you would read in other books, but he applies it to real life situations in the war, and it's just like, oh man, like it makes your situation that you think is going to end your life seem so insignificant compared to some of the stuff that he brings up. So it's a really good one.
Yeah.
Mate, I want to bring it back to almost like closer to that gym environment. A lot of the people that listen to this will be training in the gym regularly. And it's more to do with, I remember 7 or 8 years ago, there was a guy who was training CrossFit with me. And, we did a workout Murph, which I'm sure you're aware of, which is 1 mile run, 100 pull-ups, 200 push-ups, 300 squats, and then finishes with a mile run. And if you walk into a gym as a newbie or you're new to the gym, you see that and it's like, alarm bells are ringing. Whereas people who are in that environment, it's kind of, we do that maybe a couple of times a year. It's not too bad. You work through it. And something that really stuck out to me, and when he said it, I didn't really think much of it, but he was very adamant that CrossFit had made him a better person. And I'm not just, blowing smoke up CrossFit's ass. Like there's loads of other great, gyms and fitness facilities and stuff like that. But he talked about how he relates that particular workout, to things that he does in his work environment as well. So he had a busy corporate job. And he said to me, he said, I'm able to break Murph down, set small goals, break up the push-ups, break up the pull-ups and squats. And it seems like a mountain at the start, and then I get through it. And he said he applies that into daily work that he does. And, when he first said it, I thought, that's very cliche. But the more that I think about that now, it actually means a lot more now.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of the cliches, you realize that they're there for a reason. And sometimes you need to really experience it to realize that somebody figured this out a long time ago. And it sounded like a cliche to those that haven't experienced it. Until you experience it, you're like, that's what they're talking about. Now I really get it. And that's, mate, it's absolutely it. It's one foot in front of the other in an ultra, right? And you never go into a race thinking about what's going to happen in the last 10K. The longest race I've been involved with to date is a 137. So just contextualized, you've got the Marathon du Sable multi-stage ultra racing, where you're running a marathon or more than a marathon each day, multiple days, until the finish line. The more difficult races are the ones that don't have a sleep in the middle. You just go. You start and you go. And the longest one was actually down in Oman, when the UTMB, which is kind of almost like the World Cup of ultra running from Mont Blanc, they created a race in Oman, and that was 137 kilometers straight. So just one go. You start at about 7 p.m. You go through the night, so your circadian rhythm starts to get a little bit weird. You go through the dawn. You're like, okay, body's still like, what's going on? I was supposed to, because you don't really sleep the day before, do you? You've got a race at 7 p.m. It's not like you're sleeping all day. So, so you might have woken up at maybe an hour or two later that morning, but you've still been awake all day at that point. And then we ran through the morning, through that day, through the following night, and through the following day. So it was, race-wise, I was on the course for 42 hours and awake for 56. And that was the longest single thing I have ever done in my life, and obviously one of the most stressful in every possible way. So going back to your point, at no point did I worry about the second half of the race. In my head, the only race that I was running was to the halfway point. I didn't even let my mind think about the second half. If I get to the halfway point, I'm going to sit, I'm going to have some food, I'm going to change my socks, I'm going to do these things. And that's how I broke it down. And before that, it was just stage to stage, just the next checkpoint, focus on the next checkpoint. And that's all you do. And then you start to play like, some mind games on yourself, and you think, out of this. I'm done. I don't think I can do it. And you start playing with yourself and you're like, right, well, I'll get to the next checkpoint, but I will stop just afterwards. And as soon as you get out the checkpoint, you start going again. You're not going to stop. You'll never turn around. You're never going to turn around and go back to a checkpoint. It's like, oh, just after the next one, just after the next one. So you have to do all these sort of things, but you break it down into bite-sized chunks to say, I just need to get to that peak. I'll deal with whatever else is afterwards. And sometimes it's another 20 hours of running in the case of getting to that halfway point. But you just don't let that into your mind at the time, because that just seems unsurmountable. How are you ever going to go for 137 kilometers, 8,000 meters of elevation? No one in their right mind could consider that, but you can break it down and you can pretty much achieve anything.
There's a book that I'm actually re-listening to right now, The Power of Habit, which is an unbelievable book. And he talks about small wins. And it's like when they're doing research on it, the scientific name for it is literally small wins. And it's, when someone's starting out on their fitness journey, just going for a walk once a week, or if it's nutrition, cutting out this, and just that very small thing is enough to be able to catapult you into the next thing. Talk about keystone habits and exercise and stuff. And that's exactly the same thing. We all go through those, whether you're an ultra endurance athlete, whether you're, recreational trainer. That struggle is always real in whatever environment that you're in. Your body telling you to stop, whether it's doing Murph in the gym, an ultra, doing your regular Tuesday night workout. Those same questions are coming up even before you get to the gym. Those same questions are coming up. I'm tired. I don't want to do that. But it's being able to have that perseverance to, really push through. Yeah,
look, I fully subscribe to that. I think there's a couple of other concepts around that will help listeners in order to achieve more, if that's what they're aiming to do. And celebrating those small wins is critical, because getting to a point. I mean, we've had the Olympics recently. Those athletes have gone through so much, but all they focused on was what they had to do this week for training. And then their coach told them what they had to do for next week. At no point did they think over the next 4 years, and okay, the coach would have done that. But like, if they'd broken their training, let's say they're a cyclist and they're doing 100 hours a week, and then they started thinking about what's the next 2 years look like, thousands and thousands of hours sat in that saddle. There is nobody's going to do that. But if they break it down into what I need to do this week, it's achievable. Like, I've done that before. I've done close to it before. It's only 10% more than I've done before. I can achieve that. So it very much so. I agree with in terms of breaking that down. A couple of other things is understanding why, and that's both internal and external. It's sort of intrinsic, extrinsic motivation, and also making decisions in advance. So what I mean by that is, it's going to get real at some point, right? So, for example, on the let's say the softest way that we can introduce this concept. If you decide, I'm going to wait until I wake up tomorrow morning to decide if I'm going to go to the gym or not. I'm going to make that decision when I wake up. Almost every time that alarm goes off, you're going to go, nope, don't feel like it, because nobody feels like getting out of bed at 5 or 5:30 in the morning. It's discipline that gets you out of bed, motivation and then discipline. But no, if you're just going to give yourself the ability to make the decision at that point, it's not going to happen. Now, on a more extreme example is, when you're in the middle of an ultra, and let's say this 137K, you're 100 kilometers in, and your body's broken. You're running out of food because you didn't calculate it properly. Your head's banging, body's broken. You feel like absolute shit. And if you let yourself make the decision at that point, you're out. You're out. But what you need to do is you go through these mental exercises to say, I know that this is going to be horrific. I know it's going to be terrible. And when I get there, this is how I want to behave. It goes back to the start of the conversation around choosing those behaviors. How do you want to behave when things get really tough and really difficult? You have to make those decisions before you get to that point. So that's one side of it. And the other side of it is this intrinsic, extrinsic motivation, and understanding, why did you choose to put yourself here? Why did you choose to put yourself in the gym at 9:30 at night when your friends are out for a glass of wine, but you're trying to achieve something? Why are you in the middle of this ultra in the mountains on your own? It's dark and the wind's howling, and it's a very inhospitable place to be, and you feel like throwing up. Why did you choose to do that? You have to have an answer that's both internal, because you're building something inside you. You want to experience and squeeze as much life out of life, whatever that might be. And then secondly, I believe you have to have an external motivation. It can't just be about yourself, because everybody psychologically is actually quite easy on themselves. People will let themselves off the hook before they will let themselves off the hook for somebody else. And what I mean by that, if you're doing this for a bigger cause, if you've got hundreds of people that have sponsored you, and you've got a support team that's supporting you because you're doing some crazy race somewhere, and you've got people that are invested in your success. You don't want to let them down. Notice this, with the first thing that people say when they come across the line at the Olympics and they've won a gold medal, or they've expected to win a gold medal and they came last, they either thank everybody or they say sorry to everybody, because they were motivated by external forces just as much as they were motivated by internal forces. So it's understanding, like, you need to bring every tool that you can to the forefront in order to achieve these things. Nobody's built like some sort of robot. Like, even Olympians, they're not built like robots. They have to use every mental tool and trick that they can in order to get themselves into the gym, to hit every target in training, and hopefully achieve what they want to achieve. And all of us can do that. So to listeners, don't accept that victim's mindset from yourself to be like, oh, they're different to me. They've just got it all worked out and they're robots and I can't do it. No, it's about saying to yourself, how do I want to behave? What's my internal motivation? What's my external motivation? Why am I doing all of this? And then committing.
Yeah, that's really great information. And that kind of leads me on to probably my last question for you. And again, I heard you talk about this on Chris Williamson's podcast. And it was around balancing your obviously your work life and your training and relationships and that type of stuff. And I thought it was really great the way that you spoke about being able to, pull back from certain areas. Maybe it's your training because your business needs more attention, vice versa. If business is kind of going well, you're able to put more focus into something like endurance racing. Do you want to just talk about that a little bit?
Yes, absolutely, mate. It's it's something that I know has helped a few people, and it certainly helped me massively. And it's this concept. One of the questions I do get quite a lot is, how do you balance everything? I'm newly married, so obviously there's a very strong relationship there. There's a business that I'm running. It's the ultras and everything that goes into this sort of fitness side as well. And people are like, no, how do you balance all of these things? And first, I'm going to caveat that with I don't do it perfectly in any which way, and I don't have some secret. But there's a few things that I've learned along the way that I think can help, because it's what I live by, and it's understanding that what does balance actually mean? Balance gets you to what? Zero, right? Everything's balanced you at zero. That's not where any of us want to be. Messi's probably not great at mathematics, but he's damn good at football. Elon Musk is one of the best engineers in the world, one of the best foremost minds in the world, but he's probably not good at many, many other things that you and I are pretty good at. But so those people have just gone all in on their strengths, not worried so much about their weaknesses, to the extent where they can't be detrimental to their strengths. But if they can just get them to a par, they'll focus the majority of their time on where they're strong. So for me, it was kind of like looking at those things and saying, right, well, there's certain people that are world class that are all in these certain areas. I don't want to be all in one certain area. I do want to have, maybe from a bird's eye view, more balance in my life. But in order to achieve something that is exceptional to me in each of those areas, it's understanding the difference around macro balance and micro imbalance. Now, what that means is to say, at any one time, I'm just going to talk from a personal perspective here. At any one time, I'm quite imbalanced in my life. So, for example, if I'm going up to a race, I'm not going out socially. My friends don't see much of me. I'm sleeping more. I'm focused on work and these things, but maybe 10, 15% less. And I'm really hammering training. And then other times, if strategically we're doing A, B, or C in the business, I'll be like, right, well, I won't do a race within these 3 months because I know that I need to be focused in this area. So it's just, if you think of it almost like, I suppose almost like a chart on a graph. It's just areas, like it's just pushing it up and bringing it back. So overall, over the course of a year or 2 years, things might look quite balanced and you're achieving a lot in these different areas. But at any singular time, you're all in on something to the best of your ability, and you're giving it everything that you've got so you can achieve the most that you are physically capable of. And it could be physical in the running, or business planning to open a new venture or open a new office or whatever it might be. And you spend all of your time and your energy and your effort and your skill set and your mind in that space. And that has to be balanced from a macro level, but it has to be imbalanced from a micro level. Otherwise, you're just going to be average at work because you're inputting average into it. You're going to be average at running because you're just inputting average into it. And every other area of your life that you find important, and you're not going to be succeeding as much as you could. So it's understanding what are your priorities. And that's the first point, right? Family, friends, business, fitness, personal, whether that be spirituality and the like. It's understanding what are your priorities in each of these areas, what do you want to achieve in each of these areas, and when are you going to achieve them? Because if you try and achieve, you want to be top class in each of these things at the same time, you're going to fail, because nobody has more than 24 hours in a day. But if you balance them out and say, right, well, towards the end of the year, this is what I'm going to be focusing on. In the start of the year, this is what I'm going to be focusing on. So I don't chunk it down into weeks and days and get super granular and analytical about it. But I do look at it across the course of a year and say, what are the major things that I want to achieve this year? And how does that break down into when is the next race that I'm booked in for? Okay, cool. So let's start planning backwards from that and say, well, I'm not going to be doing that within 2 months of that race, and I'm not going to be doing that within 2 months. So it's balancing those things, and it's never perfect, but that's probably been the singular approach, without getting too granular, the singular approach that's really helped me achieve more in these different verticals.
Yeah, nice. And I think what's really powerful about that, and what I took from it, is that I find that, I'm having these conversations daily with clients, and, I go through this myself as well, that when you're starting an adventure to reach a water goal, whether it's getting fit, improving your nutrition, running a race, something like that, you almost label yourself as someone who is going to be that forever. So people go through, so I've cleaned up my diet. I don't eat carbohydrates anymore. I am going to be that person forever.
Yeah.
And they don't, there's no kind of like awareness that, hey, you can back off and then start to put your time and effort into other areas. And then guess what? You can come back to that. And it's maybe not having that awareness of around that people kind of see to be able to push on and progress.
Absolutely, mate. It's no, don't let anyone else put yourself in a pigeonhole, and don't do it to yourself either. No, you can jump in and out of any box that you want. Sometimes I'm an ultra endurance athlete that's pushing limits of mental endurance, and then 2 months later I'm not that guy. I'm running 10K with my mates, and I'm blowing just as much as they are. But then I know what I can get back to once I choose to do that. And then other times I'm on a panel talking about business and agencies and all that fun stuff, and I'm that person. I'm the guy that runs that agency, and I'm that person. And then other times I'm not. I'm just on. I'm on holiday, and I'm taking a step back a little bit, and it's cyclical in terms of what you want to achieve against your priorities. And it's freeing as well, to be honest, because you don't have to be what people expect you to be all of the time. Like, no, you can change those labels, and they don't even have to be like external labels in terms of overtly. You can just go off and do some other stuff for a few weeks and a few months. It's completely at 180 degrees to what everyone expects you to do, or who you were last month. And that's been really freeing for me in terms of where you travel, what you do, how you spend your time. And that's, I see people getting stuck in, this is who I am, this is what I do. And sometimes over-identifying with a job, for example, that's an easy one, right? I am this person that does this thing. Now, if you over-identify with that, what happens when you lose that job? And you're no longer that person? What happens if you change industry? But you've identified so much with being this guy. How can you then be this person over here? So it's I suppose it's just freeing yourself from society's focus on everybody has to have a label, and everybody has to do certain things, and people want to know what you are so they know how to label you. And that, I'm not necessarily saying that from a negative connotation, but I mean that so that they understand how to process you, where you fit into their world. My friends do this, my friends do this, my friends do this. And who's this guy that does all of these things? And I don't realize, sometimes he's over here, and sometimes he's over here, and sometimes he's at the bar and he's drinking with his mates, having fun. And other times he's eating salad for 3 months and just on protein shakes and being that guy. And you can move around, but just, it was quite freeing when I kind of figured that out and became more comfortable with who I was.
Yeah, you nailed it there. And I'm sure everybody can think about groups of people that they're friends with. You have like a party group, you have like the fitness group, you have the guy who works all the time. You can kind of label that. So yeah, I think it's super powerful. Anyway, Tom, I don't want to take any more of your time. Thanks so much again for coming on. Where can people find you?
No, mate, I really appreciate it. Thank you very much for the invite. It's been a great chat. To be honest, Instagram mostly. So at Tom Otton, Otton. That's where I spend probably a little bit too much of my time. Professionally on LinkedIn, same thing again. Obviously, just my name. For anything that's related to the agency life and agency world. And to be honest, no, I really do mean it when I ask people if they want to reach out drop me a DM if there's something I can help with. Now, I do have quite a few of these conversations online. I do enjoy those conversations as well. So don't feel like it's just asking for something. I do get something out of it as well in terms of helping people. So if there's anything that you're struggling with, a challenge you're struggling with, you're stuck in a rut, look, just drop me a message on Instagram, and I'll see if I can help out with anything.
Yeah, amazing. I'll be sure to tag you in there so people can get in touch with you easily. But thanks again, mate.
Amazing. Thanks so much.